Welcome to Study Faith with AI, where we use the power of AI to help you explore the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I'm Meg Jensen.
And I'm Paul Carter.
And we're Google AIs. Whether you're a lifelong member or just starting to learn about the church, we're here to dive deep into its history, beliefs, and culture.
So if you're ready to learn, you're in the right place.
That's right.
Let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into 1838, a pivotal year for early Mormonism. It's all about Joseph Smith's first vision, but we're going beyond just the story.
Yeah, what's really fascinating is that the most detailed account of this vision emerges during, well, a real tumultuous time for Joseph Smith and his followers. 1838 is a year full of dissent, violence, and a growing crisis of authority for Smith.
So let's set the stage then. 1838, we're in Kirtland, Ohio. This is the heart of the Mormon community at the time, but things aren't exactly peaceful and prosperous, are they?
No, not at all. The Kirtland Safety Society, a bank founded by Joseph Smith and other church leaders, fails, causing a major financial crisis that impacts the entire community.
So, like, adding fuel to the fire. People are losing their savings, questioning leadership. What impact does this have on the overall faith of the community?
Well, it breeds disillusionment and doubt, Prominent figures start voicing their concerns, people like Dicuss, who was a counselor to Joseph Smith, and eventually he leaves the church.
So it's not just a few individuals here and there. This is like a wave of apostasy, a significant number of people leaving. That must have been a huge blow to Joseph Smith's authority.
Absolutely. Imagine trying to lead a movement with all that external pressure, then you add internal turmoil and accusations from former allies. It's a recipe for instability. And 1838 seems to be that boiling point.
And it's not even just the internal issues they're dealing with. The situation in Missouri, where another Mormon community is established, is becoming increasingly violent.
Right. If you think back a few years to 1832, Joseph Smith and Sidney Rigdon were tawed and feathered in Ohio. It was a brutal act, meant to send a message. And in Missouri, tensions escalate even further, with anti-Mormon sentiment becoming increasingly violent.
Hold on, tarred and feathered. Can you explain that for our listeners who might not be familiar?
Sure, it's a form of public humiliation and torture. Hot tar is poured over someone and then feathers are stuck to it. Incredibly painful and, often used by mobs to intimidate and punish.
That's horrifying. So this violence against Mormons, it wasn't just the sudden outburst in 1838. It had been simmering for years.
Exactly. It's an escalation of hostility that culminates in the 1838 Mormon War. It was a full-blown, armed conflict between Mormons and their Missouri neighbors.
Wow, okay, so we have the Kirtland crisis with economic hardship and apostasy shaking the foundations of the movement, and we also have this escalating mob violence in Missouri. It's a pressure cooker.
And right in the middle of all this, one of Joseph Smith's closest confidants, Oliver Cowdery, leaves the church.
Now, Oliver Cowdery, he wasn't just any follower. He was instrumental in the early days of Mormonism, wasn't he?
He was. He was considered the second elder of the church and played a vital role in the translation of the Book of Mormon. He was also one of the three witnesses, the ones who testified to seeing the angel Moroni and those golden plates.
So his leaving, this isn't just personal, it's like a public relations disaster, right? How does his apostasy impact people's perception of Joseph Smith and the movement as a whole?
It cast a huge shadow of doubt. This man, so closely tied to the foundational claims of Mormonism, publicly denounces Joseph Smith, so it adds fuel to that fire of criticism and skepticism that was already there.
This really paints a picture of just how chaotic 1838 was for Joseph Smith and his followers. But this is where it gets interesting. Right in the middle of all this, the most detailed account of Joseph Smith's first vision appears.
It's like this account is specifically addressing the challenges he's facing. The dissent, the violence, the accusations of deception. It's a story that reaffirms his calling as a prophet and the divine authority behind Mormonism.
That's a big claim. Let's break all of that down in the next part of our deep dive. We'll be exploring the motivations and the nuances of this pivotal first vision account.
Okay, so we've set that scene. 1838, a year of intense pressure for Joseph Smith and the early Mormon movement. Now let's look at how all of this could have shaped the 1838 First Vision account. The one that becomes the canonical version.
Right. It wasn't even the first time that he had written about this vision, right? There are those earlier accounts from 1832 and 1835. So why do you think that this 1838 version stands out?
Well, it's much more detailed, and more importantly, it was meant for a wider audience. This account is published in the church's official history. It wasn't just like a personal journal entry or something.
So context is everything.
Hmm.
What was going on in 1838 that might have influenced the shape and the content of this account?
Well, the 1838 account really emphasizes certain elements that weren't as prominent in the earlier versions, in particular, the appearance of God the Father and Jesus Christ as well as distinct beings.
And that's a very key theological point that sets Mormonism apart from other Christian denominations of the time.
Exactly. And remember, this is a time when Joseph Smith is facing accusations of heresy and deception, right? So the 1838 account kind of serves to bolster those claims of divine authority. It's this powerful statement reinforcing his role as a prophet, chosen by God.
Okay, let's break this down a bit more for our listener. We have these three accounts of the first vision, each written at different points in Joseph Smith's life. The 1832 account is the earliest, and it's the one written in his own handwriting. It focuses on Jesus appearing to him and forgiving his sins. The 1835 account adds many angels to the scene, but still doesn't mention God the Father. Then we have the 1838 account, the one that's published in the church's official history, and that one includes this dramatic appearance of both God the Father and Jesus as separate beings.
Right. So how do we interpret these evolving details?
Well, critics of Joseph Smith see these different accounts as evidence of fabrication, like he was embellishing the story over time to fit his needs.
And supporters emphasize personal revelation and a growing understanding of spiritual truths. So it's this really interesting debate touching on memory, the historical context, and even the nature of religious experience.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate for a second. Couldn't you argue that the 1838 account, coming when it did, during all this scrutiny and opposition, seems a little too convenient? Almost like a well-timed defense strategy.
That's a valid point, and it's something that historians and theologians have been grappling with for centuries.
So where do we go from here? How do we even weigh these different interpretations and make sense of all of this?
I think it's important to remember that we're dealing with the past, and the past is always open to interpretation. We don't have a time machine. We can't go back and actually witness these events. All we have are the historical records and the accounts, documents and the different interpretations that people have made over time.
So what does all of this mean for our listener then?
Mhm.
What's the takeaway from this deep dive into Joseph Smith's first vision and this tumultuous year of 1838?
Well, I think it's a reminder that history is rarely neat and tidy. It's messy and complex and often full of different layers of interpretation. It's about asking questions and considering multiple perspectives, and grappling with uncertainty. The first vision, regardless of your own personal beliefs, offers a fascinating window into how faith, history, and human experience all intersect.
It's about understanding how the historical context can really shape the way we remember and interpret these events, especially events that are as personally significant as a religious experience.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that history isn't just this collection of facts and dates. It's a dynamic and ever-evolving conversation about the past and how it impacts us today.
So we've explored this turmoil of 1838, right? A year marked by economic hardship, apostasy, and all this violence. We've delved into the evolution of those first vision accounts, the motivations behind them, and all these different interpretations they've inspired. But what's this so what? Why should our listener care about this?
It's about understanding the historical context of one of the most foundational stories of Mormonism, right? And it's about being able to critically evaluate those historical sources and understanding how personal experience can actually intersect with broader historical forces. It's recognizing that even those seemingly straightforward historical narratives are often a lot more complex than they might appear.
And that's the beauty of history, isn't it? It challenges us to think critically and question assumptions and grapple with all the nuances.
And by doing that, we gain a deeper understanding not just of the past, but of ourselves and the world that we live in today.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into this pivotal year in Mormon history. And I hope that our listener will keep exploring this topic and come to their own conclusions about the first vision and its enduring legacy. Okay, so we've talked about that turbulent backdrop of 1838 and how the first vision accounts evolved over time. Let's focus specifically on that 1838 account itself. What are some of the details that really stand out to you, especially in light of all those challenges Joseph Smith was facing?
Well, one really striking thing is how the 1838 account directly addresses those accusations and rumors that were spreading about Joseph Smith at the time. He actually writes, "At length I came to the conclusion that I must either remain in darkness and confusion, or else I must do as James directs, that is, ask of God."
So it's like he's framing his search for truth as this response to all the religious confusion of his time.
Right.
And he's directly pushing back against people who are calling him a deceiver or a fanatic.
Exactly. And then he goes on to describe, how he was actually persecuted for telling other people about his vision. He writes, some few believed my testimony, but the majority rejected it, and some treated me with much contempt and sought to injure me.
It almost reads like he's writing a defense, against those who doubted his claims. He's drawing these parallels between his experience and the persecution faced by, like, biblical prophets.
That's a really interesting point. And it's also worth noting that the 1838 account is the first one to clearly state that the whole purpose of the vision was to establish the true Church of Christ. It's setting Mormonism apart from other existing Christian denominations.
Ah, so he's not just claiming to have a personal revelation here. He's laying the foundation for this whole new religious movement, one that claims to have restored the original gospel.
Right, exactly. And that ties directly into the challenges of 1838. Remember we talked about the Kirtland crisis, how so many people were questioning Joseph Smith's leadership, and then the violence in Missouri was all rooted in religious prejudice against Mormons. So this 1838 account, with that emphasis on a restored church and divine authority, it really serves to counter all those threats.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, look, yes, we're different, but that difference is rooted in divine revelation. We're not heretics. We're the true heirs of Christ's church.
It's a really compelling interpretation, and it kind of highlights that strategic purpose this account may have served during that, intense moment of crisis.
So let's bring all of this back to our listener now. We've explored the historical context, we've looked at those evolving accounts, and the possible motivations behind this 1838 First Vision account. So what's the big takeaway from all of this?
Well, the first vision, no matter what your personal beliefs are, is a fascinating look at how faith, history, and narrative all come together. It shows us how personal experiences can be shaped by and can even shape those historical lands.
It's also a good reminder that history is rarely black and white. There's so many layers of interpretation and different perspectives, and often a lot of uncertainty.
And that's what makes studying history so interesting. It's all about asking questions and thinking critically about the sources and, well, grappling with the complexity of it all. It's recognizing that the past isn't some fixed thing, but an ongoing conversation, and we're all a part of it.
I think that's a great place to end our deep dive today. I really hope our listeners will continue to explore this topic and make their own conclusions about Joseph Smith and that first vision and the history that shaped this really important moment in Mormon history. Until next time.
If you find value in this exploration, please like, share, follow, and consider becoming a subscriber. Your contributions help keep these conversations going and allows us to maintain the highest quality production. You can find all the details at studyfaithwithai.com. Thank you for being part of this journey.